Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. And this time I wanted to talk to you about Neptune retrograding back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces on October 22nd. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but all planets, with the exception of the Sun and the Moon, turn retrograde. Mercury turns retrograde 3 times a year, for instance, while the outer planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, spend around half the time retrograde during the year and the other half time moving direct or out of retrograde during a time of year. So, in fact, the outer planets spend about half the year in retrograde. So it's kind of hard to tell the difference between when they're moving forward and when they're moving backward. Neptune retrograde is like, I want you to think of Neptune retrograde like a wave breaking on the beach and then receding back into the ocean. Neptune direct is the wave breaking onto the beach and spreading out in all kinds of directions, and Neptune retrograde is the water pulling back into itself, receding back into the ocean that it just moved forward from. So this back and forth motion, this wave breaking on the beach and receding back into the water, curling back into another wave that then breaks upon the beach, is the best way that I can think of describing Neptune being direct and Neptune being retrograde. The action seems like one complete and full action. So again, I mean, you can see when the wave is breaking on the shore and receding back into itself, but it's a constant motion. It's a constant rhythm, something that's very clear to people who happen to live by the ocean. Now, we don't really think much about this back and forth motion of the wave breaking on the shoreline. But what's really going on here is that the waves are shaping the shoreline. They are creating the shape of the shoreline through their constant breaking upon the shore and moving back into themselves again. Neptune plays a similar role in our own lives. Neptune in astrology is named after the Roman god Neptune, or the Greek version, which was Poseidon, who was the god of the ocean. And the ocean was, and still is, a very mysterious place. In fact, there are so many species that exist in the ocean that we haven't even discovered or encountered yet. It's countless. And when you think that the ocean covers 3/4 of the planet Earth, then you can begin to imagine or begin to see how mysterious the realm of the ocean, how mysterious the realm of Neptune really is. Another way to think of Neptune in astrology is as Carl Jung's collective unconscious. That's the idea of a collective unconscious was that all of humanity was linked to one another through their sleep, through their unconscious, which became the sort of storehouse of a collective memory, but also a storehouse of a collective imagination. Now, that doesn't mean that we're all dreaming the same dream when we go to sleep, but what it does mean is that we go to sleep, and in our sleep, we have dreams that aren't just a complete replication of what we did that day. These dreams may show up in different ways with different monsters or curious shapes or curious twists on people that we know. And what Carl Jung believed is that if you go down into the collective unconscious, or actually draw upon the collective unconscious, you'll see certain motifs in dreams that repeat themselves over and over and over again, but according to the context of the culture that you're raised in. Okay, so not everyone is going to dream of the same thing. Okay, that's the collective unconscious. It's kind of like the collective dreaming of humanity, but also the culture that you were raised in, the country you come from, the folk beliefs or the traditions. All of those also inform your dream life activity as well. So we can have personal dreams, but we can also have dreams in which we sort of like creeks or rivers that pour into rivers that pour into the ocean and fill the ocean. Poseidon not only ruled over the ocean, but all the bodies of water that were connected to the ocean, where our own personal dreams can sort of spill out into the larger collective dream. This is essentially what Jung was talking about, and that we are in some ways mouthpieces, or we are in some ways susceptible to these archetypes, these symbols, these images that are recognizable in a culture and that are connected to certain motifs, archetypes that might be connected to birth, archetypes that might be connected to death, archetypes that might be connected to reaching a point in your life which is like a crossroads, feeling lost, archetypes that are connected to a numinous spirituality. All of these things were gathered and kept in the collective unconscious. And so this is basically what the planet Neptune rules. We say that it is the planet of the imagination, and it's the planet of the vision, of having a vision of things, a vision of the way that we think things should be, but it goes so much deeper. And so because Neptune rules over our collective unconscious, or another way of saying it is that because Neptune rules over our collective psyche, it can be said that Neptune rules over the way that that collective psyche shapes the world. So what does Neptune, retrograding back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces, mean? Well, a lot of things. The first thing that comes to mind is that Neptune retrograding back down to the zodiac sign of Pisces is doing this in order to touch base with the zodiac sign of Pisces, which is the zodiac sign that Neptune rules, before it leaves the zodiac sign of Pisces for good. Now, does that mean that Neptune is leaving the zodiac sign of Pisces forever? No. But when Neptune leaves the zodiac sign of Pisces for good for the last time on January 27th, 2026, Neptune won't return to the zodiac sign of Pisces for another 165 years. Okay, so basically a year in Neptune's time, which is the time that it takes the planet Neptune to orbit the sun, a Neptune year translates to 165 of our years. Now, this is good news for people who are born under water signs, and those water signs would be Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and for those people born under earth signs like Taurus and Capricorn. Virgo, it's been a bit of a struggle having Neptune in your opposite sign, but I'll get to that a little bit later. It's not such good news for people born under fire and air signs. The fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and the air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So why is it not such great news for them? It's because Neptune recently this year, well, in March this year, which is 2025, in March 2025, Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries. And when Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries, it began really working its Neptunian magic on the fire signs. And because the air signs are related to the fire signs, it's a complementary element, it did that with the air signs as well. So these were the signs that suddenly felt a thrust forward, like the things that they had envisioned for themselves were actually coming true. Or if they were going through, sort of periods of disillusionment, it was a disillusionment that really served them in breaking free, in breaking out of a certain mental or psychological confines. And so for the air and fire signs with Neptune moving into your zodiac sign, you were going to feel very much like you were moving forward again, that the wind was in your sails, that life was really corresponding to the way that you envisioned life should be. So this was really good. But for the earth and water signs, this was more of a struggle because fire is not a complementary element for water and for earth. And so water and earth have a very different temperament than the fiery temperament. And so they would have been struggling with Neptune having left the sign and moved to another sign. So now with Neptune retrograding back down into Pisces on October 22nd, and it will be there until January 27th, this is an opportunity for the water and earth signs to sort of touch base with Neptune and Pisces, to sort of feel this sense of closure. But it's more than closure. It's more kind of like, now I understand what Neptune and Pisces these last 13 years has been all about. And I want to take this with me moving forward. So you can almost, if you're born under those water and earth signs, you can almost think of this period between now and the end of January as taking a canteen and putting it in a cool pool of water and closing the canteen, and this is what you're going to carry on forward. And if you're born under an air or a fire sign, this return to Neptune is going to bring up some issues that you might still be a little bit sensitive about. But nevertheless, it's a really good idea for you to revisit these issues before Neptune comes back into Aries at the end of January and moving on forward. Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom, and I'm your weekly horoscope columnist here on Astrology Hub. And that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. Did you know that you could get my free weekly horoscopes sent directly to your inbox every week? Just go to www.astrologyhub.com/horoscope to sign up and start receiving yours today. If you're born under the zodiac sign of Aries, or you have Aries rising, Neptune entering your zodiac sign in March 2025 would have glamorized everything about being Aries. Okay, basically, Neptune mythologizes or glamorizes whatever zodiac sign it's traveling through. So a simple way of thinking of it would be that Neptune made being Aries cool. Okay, like everyone all of a sudden wants to be an Aries, all right? So those attributes that we connect to Aries, which is urgency and passion and willfulness and nobility and heroism and really wanting to be the best that you can possibly be, all of these things would have been glamorized when Neptune entered your zodiac sign. And you would have felt very much like, I'm a passionate person. I don't have to apologize for that. That's because I'm passionate, or I'm a very willful person, and I'm not going to compromise myself anymore. I'm going to be very willful. Or I'm angry about something, and I'm going to just express my anger, and that's the way it's going to be. And instead of people trying to poo-poo you or put you down, they would have been like, you know what? I'm angry too. Or I wish I had your kind of passion. Or I wish I had your sort of pioneering or adventurous spirit. You take risks and I don't. And I wish I were more like you. Okay, so all of a sudden, when Neptune is in a zodiac sign, those qualities which people might have been trying to muzzle or moderate or say, don't be so passionate about things. When Neptune's in the sign, all of a sudden those qualities are what everyone wants to be. And so this is what you would have been feeling in your life, a sort of passion, a drive forward, tackling challenges, triumphing over the challenges, feeling really good about it, and people being, I wish I could do that too. You look good when you do that. All right, so this is a good thing. And this is something that clearly you would have wanted to continue, right? Except that all planets turn retrograde at some point, and Neptune is being an outer planet, meaning a planet outside the orbit of Earth, but really outside the orbit of Saturn, because the 7 ancient planets in astrology. Neptune being an outer planet, it spends half the year moving forward and half the year moving backwards in the sky. Right now, it's backwards in the sky, and on October 22nd, it's going to re-enter the zodiac sign of Pisces, which is the zodiac sign that it's been in for the last 13 years. And you going back into Pisces is going to feel more like you going back to the way that things used to be, and you're not going to be so happy about that. So, what was the story of Neptune and Pisces? Well, I'd have to go over your last 13 years, but an idea that would have been very strong and very prevalent about Neptune and Pisces is that you would have really come to know your own vulnerability, all right, in a way that you hadn't known it before. And what I'm talking about with vulnerability here is not a failing, okay, and it's not a shortcoming. It's where you're vulnerable. I mean, we think of Aries, which is ruled by Mars, named after the Roman god of war, as being armored, armored up, with the helmets and the armor and the javelin and, attacking things, all right? But that armor protects a vulnerability that's underneath, all right? And so people born under Aries or have Aries rising would have been very aware of their vulnerability in the past few years and overcoming that vulnerability. Maybe you've gotten into a place in your life where you felt very triumphant or very good about yourself, or you sort of managed or your own personal sense of weakness, or you found really good and clever ways to hide it. So, with Neptune moving back into Pisces, that sense of vulnerability and weakness is going to be awakened again. And this isn't going to work easily with you because you're a fire sign and Pisces is a water sign. And so you're not going to like the idea of your fire being doused in any sort of way or even put out. All right. One of the things that Aries often struggles with are the issues of empathy, which is having feelings for other people's pain or having feeling for the difficulty that other people are going through. Aries has a hard time with that, not because it's unfeeling. Aries is a very feeling sign. The reason it has a hard time with that is because it's ruled by Mars, named after the Roman god of war. So Aries believes in being tough. Aries believes in being strong, and Aries believes in powering through whatever difficulty there is. Aries also believes very strongly, very powerfully in self-improvement, which is if I have a weakness, if I have a fallibility, I need to identify what it is and I need to improve upon it. It's kind of like building a muscle. You know, you might have a weak muscle, but with enough working out and trials of stamina and things like that, you're going to build up that muscle. And so this is what Aries wants to do because it's Mars driven. And so what's going on right now is that you might find yourself really reacting, maybe even overreacting in weaknesses that you perceive in other people. If you see that someone is upset about something or crying about something or complaining about something, this might be a period in which that's really getting on your nerves, in which it's kind of like, you know what, get over it. Like I want, Aries is like, I want winners, not whiners, so you might find yourself really either being kind of indifferent to other people's weaknesses or even saying, you know what, they're responsible for their own weaknesses. They took the easy way out of things and they gave in to their temptations or pleasures, or they took shortcuts, and they've made the bed that they sleep in, and now they have to sleep in it. You spent your life being profligate, and now there's regret, and I have no sympathy for your regret because that's the bed you made, and now you have to sleep in it. So there might be that kind of a response, or there might be a very visceral response towards people that you feel keep repeating self-sabotaging patterns in their life because they're just like not getting it, or they're not strong enough to improve themselves. And so this might make you a little bit harsh in your interaction, or as an Aries Sun or Aries rising, you might be covering that, but your inner monologue or your inner voice might be like, ugh, what a loser. This person, no wonder this person's going through this. They've been so spoiled, and now that life's getting tough, they're not going to be able to toughen up or something along those lines. Now, the thing is, we all have visceral reactions to other people being in pain, and we react in different ways. Some of us run towards those people and say, "Can I help?" And some of them run away. They're like, "Ooh, pain, it's an infectious disease. I want nothing to do with it." Or some people blame people for their misfortune because it distances themselves from that. And so during this period of time from October 22nd to January 27th, you might be facing certain prejudices you may have, or certain biases that you may have, or judgments you may have around weakness and suffering. And if you find that you really have a kind of unforgiving stance about that with others, or let's go one step further, if you have an unforgiving stance about pain or weakness as far as it involves you, then this is a wonderful time to look at it to examine it and to care for it. Not all pains and weaknesses have to be built upon and made stronger. Some of them just need comfort and need care. And there's nothing wrong with expressing that towards yourself or another human being. You're not indulging or enabling their weakness or their struggles. A lot of times people just need that feeling of being able to cry on a shoulder, get it out of their system, and then they can be clear-headed about, okay, what do I do next? So you're not going to spoil or harm someone by comforting them, and you're not going to spoil or harm yourself by comforting yourself during this time. Compassion has always been a strength and not a weakness. And this period of time between October 22nd and January 27th is a period of time when you are going to discover that for yourself. If you're born into Taurus or you have Taurus rising, Neptune's retrograde back into Pisces may be a little too subtle for you to really pick up on at first. Part of this is because Neptune in Pisces forms a sextile to your zodiac sign. Earth forms a natural sextile to water. These are called the feminine or the yin elements in astrology. And so it might not really register at first as being much of anything because it's so subtle, so nuanced in its shift and change of energy. But the other reason why you might not really notice it right away is because if you're born under Taurus or you had Taurus rising, you were much more focused on Uranus traveling through your zodiac sign for the last 7 years. Uranus entered the zodiac sign of Taurus in 2018, and it left the zodiac sign of Taurus in 2025. If I'm remembering correctly, it's July of 2025, thereabouts. And so during that period of time that you had Uranus, the planet of revolution and change, traveling through your zodiac sign, you were probably much more focused on the things that were being upset in your life. I mean, whenever Uranus enters a zodiac sign, it flips the game board over and it sends all the pieces flying in all directions. I mean, imagine that you're involved in a chess match and you're, moving a pawn or a rook or a knight, and everything is very tight and everything is very intricate in terms of the strategy. And imagine someone coming along, while you and your opponent are focused on this, knocking the game board over and throwing the pieces all over you. It completely shatters your concentration, upsets your world, and you're bound to be really angry or relieved if you were losing. But anyway, so the focus would have been so much on Uranus upsetting things in your life, moving the goalposts in your life, turning things upside down and inside out, that you might not have always recognized the benevolence of Neptune in Pisces. And what Neptune in Pisces would have allowed you to do is to sort of recoup from things being overthrown or turned inside out. And it would have introduced a kind of emotional resilience. This has nothing to do with willpower or toughing it out, okay? So, which are ways that we kind of think of when we think of resilience, like I'm going to get through this, or I'm going to tough it out as I go through this, as my world is turned upside down or inside out. Neptune in Pisces for the last number of years would have given you a feeling, but particularly since 2018, would have given you a feeling like things are going to work out. Not like I hope things work out, but a feeling of like, okay, this was upset. I don't know what to do, but you know what? I just have this feeling somewhere that it's leading me to a better place or that things are going to work out, or let's just see what happens. And what would have also occurred during this period of time is that you would have been pulling a lot on your ingenuity and on your creativity. And even though part of you might have resisted these upsets that were going on in your life, or part of you might have legitimately and in a very real sense suffered as a result of these upsets in your life, there was still a sense that you were drifting on a current, and the current was taking you to some place where you needed to be. You might not have had a strong idea of where you were going this whole time, but there was still a sense that it was taking you to where you needed to be. And this is something that's always kind of been in the background, perhaps, of your psyche or of your waking life. And now, that Neptune, after having spent a number of months in Aries, is retrograding back down into Pisces. And with Uranus out of your sign for the first part of this period of time that Neptune is back in Pisces, you may actually be able to return to the idea of these, of what your last 7 years have been about. And in sort of summing it up or revisiting it, there might be certain insights, there might be certain perspectives, there might even be certain opportunities that you never really saw before because you were so in the thick of things. And so when you have this kind of like very subtle, very gentle revisit, you can recognize those things. You can recognize the value of what you went through, but there's also a bit of a pay it forward flavor to it too. You can also recognize what you can do with where you are in your life right now. You can recognize how to apply gained experience, earned experience to what you're looking at right now. So what Neptune's going to do for you between October 22nd and January 27th of next year is it's going to give you this imagination, this way of seeing, this way of imaging, where you can envision doing something different. Okay. So where the last few years might have been like you were being forced to do something different or forced to hold things together as the raft was, going through a very stormy passage, now you can sort of see how you can do something different, maybe build on the new things that have come into your life, or maybe even gently let go of things that no longer work for you. But this sextile is a very gentle sextile, and it's a lovely sextile. And it's one in which, you might be like, I don't know how I can explain how I got here, but I know that now that I'm here, I know what to do with my life. And so this is kind of going to be a feeling like you've reached a destination that you weren't really clear was a destination all along, or kind of secretly hoped that there might have been an easier way of reaching it. But you may not have known what you were setting out for, but now that you're here, it feels like you. And now that Neptune is sextiling your zodiac sign, you know how to build on what it is that you see. If you're born into Gemini or you have Gemini rising, this period of time when Neptune is retrograding back down into Pisces is going to be a little disorienting for you. The reason for that is because of the recent influx of air and fire energy into your own horoscope. In March of 2025, Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries, and in May of 2025, Saturn entered the zodiac sign of Aries. And over the summer, Uranus, the planet of revolution and change, entered the zodiac sign of Gemini. What this would have done is bring a lot of fire and air energy into your horoscope, where you had felt before like you might have been moving against the current or things weren't really going the way that you wanted them to. All of a sudden, because you're an air sign, you're going to benefit from the fire and air energy that's coursing through the horoscope as a result of these three planets, Neptune, Saturn, and Gemini. And then while we're at it, let's throw in Pluto and Aquarius, which is another air sign. So you would have really felt like you were making a lot of headway in your life, that a lot of things that you had set out to do were being fulfilled, and that if you needed to change course, you could change course very quickly. So this, period of time from basically late spring to now has been and should have been a very good and wonderful period of time for you where you felt like you were making a lot of advances. But at the same time, uh, being a Gemini, you might have gotten a little bit worried about how quickly everything was happening, which is kind of ironic because Gemini is ruled by Mercury and everything is very quick, short, and fast. So what you might find yourself feeling now that Neptune is retrograding back down into Pisces is maybe you acted a little too heatedly over the summer, or maybe you acted a little bit too quickly, or even recklessly. And this brings to mind an interesting paradox for Gemini. Gemini wants to be free to enter and exit a situation. Okay. In fact, something that makes a Gemini feel very comfortable when they get on an airplane is to work out where the emergency exits are. Or if Gemini is going to make an agreement, they'll make an agreement as long as they know where the loopholes are, how they can get out of the situation. Once they're assured that they've got an exit strategy of how to get out of a commitment or a situation or traveling on an airplane, they can relax and be comfortable. So there's a kind of escape artist to Gemini. Actually, both Mercury ruled signs have this kind of escape artistry. Um, but the irony is that Gemini, as a zodiac sign, isn't too big on freedom. In other words, it doesn't want too much freedom. Okay. Because if it has too much freedom, it kind of moves from the Mercury sphere to the Jupiterian sphere. And that's where Gemini doesn't feel really comfortable in that kind of Jupiterian type of sphere, that kind of Jupiterian type of energy. So Geminis, as a general rule, aren't too big on too much freedom or doing its own thing out of sync with everyone else. And that's because Gemini is an air sign. Air signs rule relationships. And each of the air signs rule a different type of relationship. And the relationship that Gemini rules is sibling relationships. It's the brother, the sister, the sibling you had growing up. And if you're a Gemini or Gemini rising and you weren't raised with a sibling, then there was certainly a childhood friend or someone that you played with and spent time with. Whether that friend lived next door or whether that friend was, I don't know, imaginary. But anyway, there would have been a friend, someone that you could bounce ideas off of, that you could share secrets and conversation and things like that. Even if there were times in your childhood where you're just talking to yourself. I mean, Geminis have an ability to sort of like create a twin on their own if there wasn't one that's nearby. But for the most part, Geminis have a tendency to twin. Okay, and they will they'll twin with a sibling, they'll twin with a friend, they'll twin with a colleague. And so that idea of bouncing something off of someone else is how you come up with your ideas. If you present an idea, you want to hear an argument to someone countering it and go back and forth like that. But one of the things that Gemini does rule over is sibling rivalry. And if you're born with a sibling, you're raised with a sibling in a home, then you know right away that it's the sibling that can interrupt or thwart the things that you want. Okay, maybe you want the strawberry ice cream cone that mom's offering, and your sibling wants the strawberry ice cream cone that she's offering because the other ice cream cone is, I don't know, French vanilla or something like that, or peppermint. Actually, I like both. But anyway, here's the example. But anyway, and so let's say you really want that strawberry cone, your sibling wants it, and you're going to fight over it. So Geminis are used to this, like fighting the struggling, outsmarting, competing, being better at. They really almost Gemini's really they want the best friend, the bestie. That's part of the Gemini twin equation, but they also want the evil twin. Okay, they want the person who is the enemy, the opponent, someone who's trying to take away their strawberry ice cream cone. And Geminis thrive on that as well. So with this Neptune moving back down into Pisces, you're going to switch from a feeling of like I was on a roll and I was getting everything that I wanted and this is really great to all of a sudden feeling like, am I out of control? Am I just getting everything I want? Shouldn't I be suspicious of that? Is there a trap? Is there a trap? Am I being led to believe that I'm going to get everything that I want, and then all of a sudden there's going to be a gotcha moment, or it's taken away, or something along those lines? So, this might be a period right around here, October 22nd, and even into about even November, might be a period in which I don't know if I should be trusting the people around me. I don't know if I should be trusting the headway that I'm making. I'm being made to feel like there isn't really a price to pay here, and maybe there is, and I just don't know about it. And so this is a period of time in which and this is going from October 22nd to the end of January, what you might want to do is go back and talk to some people who knew you when, all right? These might be people who were friends with you early in your life, and these might be people who were rivals or competitors earlier in your life. Now you might be like, well, why are you telling me to talk to a rival or competitor? Well, a rival or a competitor, it's part of the Gemini archetype. But the other thing that's good about a rival or competitor is they're going to tell you the truth about yourself, okay? Whether you like it or not. A friend, we love our friends because our friends support us, they understand us. We talk to them and they listen, they talk to us and we listen. Um, but a friend is pretty much here to support the way that you see the world, the way that you see yourself, and what you want to do. So a friend is always going to be supportive, a friend is always going to be in your corner. A rival or a competitor isn't, okay? Um, and so they're going to know you because they've matched wits with you. Okay. They're going to know you because last time you won the round and they lost, or maybe last time you lost and they won the round. So in that kind of competition or rivalry, they know the way you think. They know your weak spot. They know, the way that you maneuver, the way that you finesse. They're very, very knowledgeable with this. And they're not invested in being your friend. They're not invested in making you feel good about yourself. Um, and and again, some people will be like, well, why would you want to hang around someone like that? Because they're going to tell you the truth as they see it. Now, is this the absolute truth? No. But Gemini, being the zodiac sign of the twins, compares and contrasts. It's like, how are these things alike and how are these things different? If you say potato and I say potato, there's a compare, there's a contrast, there's a playfulness that can turn into arguing, that can go back to playfulness or camaraderie, or the playfulness can deteriorate into arguing and it can deteriorate into hostility. It can go any which way. And this is something that Geminis feed off of. Okay, this is what stimulates your mind. You don't want to be surrounded by yes people. I mean, you like it, everyone likes it, but you're not, I don't know, a Leo. But anyway, you don't want to be surrounded by yes people. You want to hear from that person who's rolling their eyes in the background or, has something different to say. You want to hear it because that's going to help you to understand more about yourself. And so this is the sort of thing that might be going on in your life between now and the end of January, early of February. And the more that you can listen to the things that you need to hear, you may not want to hear them, but that the things that you need to hear and to sort of work it out in your mind as to whether it pertains to you or not, chances are a lot of it will. The more that you can be open to that, the more information that you're going to be getting about yourself and about where you're going in your life that's going to become helpful. A lot of times, a rival or an opponent can point out the weakness or the fallibility in your thinking or where you're setting yourself up for disaster more effectively and more pointedly than a friend can. So play around with that idea. See what you learn or gather from these conversations. And if you do in the way that I suspect that you will, then you'll find that these conversations, these arguments, these differences of opinion actually are all going to be helping to set you up for success for when Uranus re-enters your own zodiac sign. Uranus leaves Gemini and enters Taurus for a period of time. But it's going to set you up for success for when Uranus re-enters your own zodiac sign on April 26th, 2026. So again, you might be hearing things that you don't like to hear, but maybe they're things that you should hear. And maybe they're things that are going to contribute to your future success. If you're born under Cancer or you have Cancer rising, This period of time when Neptune retrogrades back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces, it enters or re-enters Pisces on October 22nd, and it's in Pisces until about January 27th of 2026. During this period of time, this is going to be a lovely, wonderful period of time for you. Uh, Mostly because Neptune will be returning to Pisces. Pisces is a water sign, just like Cancer is a water sign. And so that increases the watery energy in your life. That increases the emotional life, the creative life, the feeling of comfort with yourself. But also, Neptune back in Pisces is going to be working with Jupiter, which is currently in your own zodiac sign right now. Jupiter is in the zodiac sign of Cancer. We all know that Jupiter is a good thing in astrology because Jupiter is the planet of good fortune and higher purpose. And whenever Jupiter enters your own zodiac sign, you can pretty much expect good things to happen. They might take curious twists or happen in odd ways, but basically, Jupiter is the planet of everything works out in the end and for your own benefit. The interesting thing here is not only do you have Jupiter, the planet of good fortune and higher purpose, traveling through your own zodiac sign, but Jupiter happens to be one of the planets that rules the zodiac sign of Pisces. Indeed, Jupiter is the traditional ruler of the zodiac sign of Pisces, and Neptune is the modern ruler. Now, Neptune didn't usurp or take over Jupiter's place. Actually, Neptune and Jupiter have co-parenting over the zodiac sign of Pisces. They're both the co-rulers of Pisces. There are three zodiac signs that have two planetary rulers. There's Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn and Uranus, Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune, and finally there is Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars and Pluto. Okay, so for you to have Jupiter, planet of good fortune, in your sign, forming a trine to Neptune, which is in Pisces, which is a good thing. That is made even better by the fact that Jupiter and Neptune both co-rule the zodiac sign of Pisces. So what's this going to create in your life? Well, I think comfort and security. In fact, I would go so far as to say that you probably haven't felt this emotionally safe and creatively fulfilled in years. So this is a wonderful time. And so this is also a time in your life when you want to be setting down roots, when you want to be refreshing those bonds with the people you like and the people that you love. And you want to be jettisoning or getting rid of the people in your life who you don't like and don't love. You are no longer going to feel like you're responsible for someone or obligated to someone, that you have to be there for someone because you need to be their rock of Gibraltar or their anchor. Even if the person's always bitchy or horrible to you and does and says awful things or just doesn't even show any appreciation, you have full permission from the stars to get rid of them in your life. You no longer have to put up with them and to really bond with the people that you really want to bond with. And this period of time between October 22nd and January 27th of next year, it's so important. These next few weeks are so important because they're going to be of the nature of water. That means they're going to be restorative, they're going to be refreshing, and they're going to be replenishing of your own personal psychic energy. And you, if you're born under Cancer or having Cancer rising, you need to drink up. Think of taking a canteen and pouring it, moving it into a body of water and filling it up. You need to fill up your thermos, you need to fill up your canteen, you need to fill up one of those camel packs that you see people walking around with straws. You need to fill this up with water energy because you're a water sign. You need to fill this up with water because the air and the fire energy will start to increase again at the end of January or into the early part of 2026. And it's going to be pretty much all air and fire for a number of years. So this is your oasis right now. Fill up on this energy right now and carry it around with you because probably in 2026, you're going to be back on the move again. Now, this could indicate a move, like a change of location or something along those lines, change of residence. But what could also be happening in 2026 is that you might be doing a lot of commuting or you might be doing a lot of traveling over air and fire spaces, all right? And part of you might be like, oh no, I don't want to go there. I want to be in my like tide pool. I want to be in my watery place. But remember that you were born under the zodiac sign of the crab, which means that you carry your home wherever you go. You're not you're not coral and you're not a barnacle. You don't adhere to one spot in your life. Okay. So this idea of filling up the water in yourself and carrying it with you is a very powerful thing because it's also a very empowering thing. The more that you carry this water with you into areas that aren't maybe that simpatico with you or comfortable for you, the more that you're going to be, when you're carrying or drawing upon your own water energy, the more that you're going to be able to subsist on your own. You're going to be able to take care of yourself. And so this is going to teach you a different lesson. You don't have to be in a watery environment that complements and supports who you are. You can go into environments that maybe don't complement or support who you are. But as long as you have that inner sense of an emotional reservoir that you carry around within you, you will never be depleted. Neptune's retreat back into Pisces also doesn't mean that you're retreating from the world. If anything, I guess it's an idea that I really want to, emphasize with you. If anything, it's really a fuel up station because it replenishes your reserves and outfits you for the next leg of your personal journey. You're going to find that your response to fire and air energy is going to be less overwhelmed by it and more like, okay, this is the next area that I have to go to in my life. And instead of looking for things that are going to support you, you're going to be calling upon yourself to support yourself and to support those of the people around you that you feel like supporting. So this restorative time is also going to be a very empowering time. You're going to feel less like you need someone else to do or to lean on, and you're going to feel more like you are that person, but not because you've transformed into, I don't know, Xena warrior princess or something like that, but because you're the person who carries the water. And as long as you carry the water, that gives you a peace of mind and that gives you a profundity of purpose, something which is sorely lacking a lot in this world and something which is a beautiful thing to be carrying around inside of you. If you're born under Leo or you have Leo rising, you took a bit of a gamble recently. Uh, and this gamble is you might have decided to leave something which had given you a sense of security or stability and try something else, try something different. Now, this isn't the first time that you've done this. I would go so far as to say I think your last 7 years have been about leaving something that's been secure and stable and trying something different. There's been a lot of searching and maybe not a lot of finding with Leo from 2018 to about this year. So, and that might have been a very hard thing for you to explain to yourself, as well as a very hard thing for you to explain to other people. You would have been very sensitive to anything that made you feel like you were settling for less, or like you were stuck in a rut, or that you were going nowhere fast. And that's the fire part of Leo. Leo is a fire sign. The fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. That's the fire part of Leo. You need to be true to yourself. You need to be true to the fulfillment of who you are, that you be the best person, the best Leo that you could possibly be. And so that's something that's been driving you, but there's been a feeling in the last few years of really sort of getting on the wrong bus, heading in the wrong direction, or sitting and waiting for a bus that's taking forever to show up. So that sense of trying to get back on course has been very important for you. And perhaps in March of 2025, when Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries, you got that first sense of, oh, I kind of feel like I'm back on course again. And this, or it might have occurred when Saturn entered Aries in May of 2025. But certainly it's this feeling of like, okay, now I know where I'm going. Now I'm cooking with gas. Now I've straightened it out and I'm moving in the direction that I really want to go. And of course, no sooner did these planets enter fire signs, and Leo's a fire sign, so they would have been really supporting that fiery energy of yours. It's almost like no sooner did they enter than they turned retrograde and they moved backwards. And so you might have switched from feeling like you were moving with the current of events to struggling against the current of events in just the past few weeks. This goes a little bit further with Neptune's retrograde back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces. And this happens in a very tricky part of your solar horoscope. Indeed, Neptune's retrograde back down to the zodiac sign of Pisces takes place in your solar eighth house. And so the solar eighth house has a lot to do with finances, but it's not the second house. The second house is, okay, finances. And so the second house is like finances. How much do I make? What's my budget? Am I keeping up with my budget? Am I showing a surplus? Am I not showing a surplus? And what do I need to do to, the second house is pretty matter of fact, is what I'm really trying to communicate. When we're dealing with Neptune in eighth house, the eighth house is not matter of fact. It is a house of money. It's also the house of sex and death, and other people's money. And I always joke it sounds like a 1980s punk rock band on the Lower East Side. But what it gets to is this idea of feeling beholden to other people. And so this is something that you've struggled with for a number of years, and you might have felt like you've just rounded the corner with, or that you were finally on track to the things you wanted to do, the life you wanted to live. But with Neptune's retrograde back down into Pisces, it might have put you back in that feeling of being beholden to someone else, or living in someone's shadow, or eclipsed by a larger, more dominant type of personality. And a big part of this might have been finances, but it's going to be your emotional feeling about finances. There's finances, which is just like numbers that you add up on a sheet. And then there's finances like what do you need to have in the bank to feel financially secure? What's your emotional relationship to money? Is money um, someone that keeps you under its thumb? Is money someone who lies to you and betrays you? Is money just another, person that you partner with, or even sleep with because you just go through money like going through love partners? I mean, you can almost think of money as a relationship, and the emotional undercurrent or the emotional subtext of that relationship. In other words, money isn't just about math, but it's also our relationship to money. And that can carry certain judgments, that can carry certain biases, that can carry certain patterns of behavior. you know, Money made me do it, type of thing. It's like, I'm so tired of scrimping and saving that I just felt like spending everything, or I've spent everything and now I know the value of a budget. How do I put one together? So your emotional reactions to your relationship to money, is it controlling because it's a domineering force in your life? Is it controlling because it's a scarce thing in your life? Is it beloved, or is it something that's run out on you? So this way of thinking, which one could almost call like magic thinking or imaginative thinking, but this way of thinking, reviewing your relationship to money, is something that's going to be very prevalent from October 22nd to the end of January of next year, because it has a lot to do with you not wanting to be under anyone else's thumb, with you wanting to be your own person. So during this period of time, look at the myths you have around money, the things that you tell yourself about money, because you need to debunk these myths. They're getting in the way of you owning yourself, for lack of a better way of putting it. They're getting in the way of your own self-possession. Um, you know, does money run out on you? Does it infantilize you? Does it overrule you? You need to debunk these myths. Money is not something that's bigger and larger than you or out to get you. It's currency. It's the way that we, earn. It's what we have to show for the work that we've done. It's what we do to buy and sell. And so the way that we treat money often will come out in our relationships to other people, pretty much because money has a lot to do with relationships to other people, but also the way that you treat money or other people treat money says a lot about the person. So, what I want you to do during this time from October 22nd to January 27th of next year is debunk these myths. Um, really ask yourself, do I have the most positive relationship to money, or do I have uh, 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 do I personalize money? Does money have something to do with my self-worth? Do I have a fear of being without it? So I'm going to these extreme lengths to keep it, or do I want nothing to do with it because I'm afraid it's going to dominate me? Debunk these myths, and what I want you to do is to take this time to focus more on building strength in yourself and your confidence in who you are, which is what water can give you. If you are emotionally confident in yourself, basically what we used to say back in the 80s, love yourself, but and I sort of make light of it, but it's true. If you love yourself, if you value yourself, that's an extraordinary thing, especially if you're a Leo. That water component isn't always the easiest thing for you to connect to with yourself. But if you love and value yourself just because you think you're a great person, which guess what? That's what it's all about. If you can put your focus on that, yeah, I think I'm a pretty good person, great person. If you can focus more on that than on proving yourself, I have to make X amount of money, or I have to prove myself in the world, or I have to show that I'm a financial success. If you can focus more on loving yourself and building on that as a strength rather than deriving your strength from something you feel like you have to do, especially financially, to prove yourself, then you're going to be in a much more happy place when Neptune changes signs again at the first part of 2026. But you're also going to be drawing on a different sort of strength, not just a fiery strength, which is, I'm a fire sign, but also a watery strength, which is, I have my fallibilities, I have my weaknesses, and that's all right because you know what? I love myself, faults and all. If you're born under Virgo or you have Virgo rising, this period of time from October 22nd until January 27th of next year, when Neptune retrogrades back down into Pisces, which is the sign that sits opposite you on the zodiacal wheel. It's the sign that's 6 months away from you in the calendar year. When you have an opposition, you can see what it is that you want. The planet is opposite you, but there is this tremendous distance between you and it. Okay, it's like seeing a friend on who's two platforms over in a subway. It's kind of like, Louise, there you are. And they're like, Cheryl, there you are. Wait, I'll come to you. No, wait, I'll come to you. And then like the trains come through. So it's like you can see what you want, but it's very, very far away from you. Another way to look at it in opposition is that when two planets are opposite one another, they retreat to their separate corners. They want nothing to do with one another. But here we're talking about one planet being opposite you. So what's the planet that's opposite you right now? That planet is Neptune when it retrogrades back down into Pisces. And Neptune has been sort of thwarting your life for a number of years right now. And don't take it out on the Pisces people in your life, okay? But Neptune as an energy has sort of been thwarting your life because every time that you think that you're getting closer to something, it draws away from you. And of course, like Tantalus in the underworld, whenever you stop pursuing it, it comes closer to you again. And then when you reach for it, it draws out of reach. So this is what Neptune's been doing with you for a number of years. It's an opposition. Neptune is the planet of what we yearn for. And it can be very much connected to pining away for something. We may be in love with someone at a distance, or we may yearn to be doing this with our lives. We may long to be in this job or situation, We may feel that if only this one thing worked out for us, then everything would come together. So Neptune often can stimulate longing and yearning in us for things that aren't in our life right now. And that's something that some people poo-poo. They say, stop yearning for the things that you can't have and just accept reality as it is, you know. And that could also be like an aspiration or a vision. Like I really do, want to do this in my life, or I don't know what was Dance Billy. What was that movie with Billy the dancer? But it was like this kid in Ireland or whatever who wants to dance and everyone's laughing and he's like, but I'm a really good dancer. The teacher is like, you're going to be a really good dancer, and so he still longs for this, even though, he's thwarted at every turn and everyone laughs at him. It's such a ridiculous dream. And of course, he ends up becoming a wonderful dancer, and I just remember his dance teacher like, dance, Billy. But anyway, there's this feeling of longing and yearning for things can also be aspirational. They can get us to envision a future in which that's happening. We don't always get things or get to places that we want to be through ambition and drive. We also do it through imagination, and we also do it through aspiring. But there's a difference between uh, wish fulfillment, or let me put it like this: there's a difference between wish and fulfillment. And we can wish for something and it may never come to be, but there can be a sense of fulfillment in the sense of what are we going to do to make that wish materialize, to make that happen. And for a long time, you've been feeling like the life you've wanted to live or the person you've wanted to be with isn't where you are right now. And and that might have led you to not be with anyone, or that might have led you to, be in a relationship or a situation and just sort of feel like, but this isn't what I'm really, this isn't what I really want. This isn't what I'm really about. Something that they really taught, I mean, something that was very much connected in the ancient world, but particularly ancient Greece, was this longing for things, and that the longing could become a disease of the heart, that you're so involved in the pining or longing for something that you don't see what you do have. Okay, you don't see the world around you accurately, and and so that dissatisfaction blinds you from the love that is around. And this can sort of be anti-romantic because romantics are kind of like, but I want to be in this place of longing and yearning for something. And people are like, well, accept your reality. You can't have it. And they're like, no, no, I can't. Okay. As a Virgo, you would have really struggled with that because Virgos are infinitely pragmatic. Okay. You're an earth sign. You're very practical. You don't want to set silly goals for yourself. But the reality is, you probably do set silly goals for yourself and you don't tell people, or you tell one or two people that you really trust. And you might have felt like you would really set these goals and you really wanted to reach them, and you might be feeling, this year like you didn't, and like you have to accept things for what they are. 2025 might have been a year of just sort of like stop yearning and, just settle for what you have. But I think that this Neptune retrograding back down into Pisces isn't here to sort of like torture you some more. I think this Neptune retrograding back down into Pisces is here to show you you've actually probably succeeded more than you think that you have, and that it just might be your way of looking at it. Neptune famously is the planet of illusion and disillusionment in astrology. It's a planet that many of us mistrust, like we would mistrust an infatuation. You fall head over heels for someone, you're infatuated with them. Your friends are like, oh, it's great. Enjoy your puppy love because one day you're going to wake up and it's not going to be there. And you're like, oh, friend, how you wound me to the heart. But the thing is, illusion is good because it deals with our imagination. If we didn't have the ability to imagine something more or different or better about life, or to reconfigure life in our view of it, then we would be living the same life day in and day out, day in and day out, and day in and day out. Imagination is that thing that allows us to see life differently. A lot of times it's been really represented as escapist. And there is an escapist side to imagination, you know. But then on another end, it's that creative ability to rework the way that you see life. And when you rework the way that you see life, new things emerge, new opportunities emerge, new possibilities emerge. You may have a recognition of talents that you never really understood before. So with Neptune coming back down into Pisces, it's not here to thwart you. It's not here to bring disillusionment. You suffered disillusionment a long time ago. What I think it's here to do is to sort of wake you up to the fact that you haven't been living in stasis or limbo this whole time. That many of the things that you've yearned for, you've probably called to you, but you may not recognize because they're not exactly what you had in mind. And so, this period of time of Neptune returning to Pisces between October 22nd to January 27th, it's kind of like the denouement. It's kind of like that moment that follows the end of a play where it's just a little comment on what's gone on. And what can happen during this time is that you may see that this might not be exactly what I had wanted, but I was still imaging. I was still creating. I'm still taking joy from things. And maybe I'm the one who's been holding back on the joy because it wasn't exactly what I wanted. And maybe if I just open the joy, or let myself feel joy without reprimanding myself or criticizing myself or feeling like you're settling for less than. If I let myself embrace that joy, I may find that it's not about accepting a lesser than. I may even discover that the lesser thans are better than what I had had in mind. And this is the beauty of a Neptune opposition. We all have to come out of our infatuation, not because reality just, is the great spoiler. We have to come out of our infatuation because it's like when the prince kisses the sleeping beauty or the prince kisses Snow White who's been poisoned, you know, without that kiss is what turns something that we idolized or put on a pedestal. That kiss wakes us up to the fact that we are flesh and blood, and that in the understanding of another person or something that we had idealized and seeing it for what it is, we engage that person or situation in a flesh and blood reality, and that actually frees us to love and to bond and to create on a level that we wouldn't have been able to do before because it was all about the longing and the disappointment. You step out of that cycle, you see the love and the beauty in what it is that you have, and all of a sudden you become present in your life in a way that you could never have imagined, and in a way that can be tremendously fulfilling. That's something that I see as being up ahead for you between October 22nd and January 27th. If you're born under Libra or you have Libra rising, this period of time when Neptune returns to the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be a sort of tempering period for you. It's going to be a period where you sort of reconnect with yourself on a deeper level. Not to say that you haven't been connected to yourself on a deep level in the past few months, but the energy is water energy as opposed to the fire energy that you've been experiencing from Neptune when Neptune entered your opposite sign of Aries in March of 2025. This water energy is deeper, okay? And it's deeper in that it's more soulful, it's more profound, it's more emotional. Whenever we get more water, more soulful, more profound, more emotional, it becomes more and more difficult to articulate it. It becomes more and more difficult to define it because water doesn't lend itself to labels or definition. Water is about emotional experience and feelings and dream and imagination. Okay. And especially with images, whether it's symbols or with pictures, water is literally pregnant with emotion and often doesn't feel comfortable speaking about it. It can describe an emotional experience, but it doesn't analyze an emotional experience. It doesn't define it. It doesn't pin it like a butterfly to a board and then give it its scientific name, species, psyche, or I don't know. I can't even make up something, but some sort of like, how they scrawl those things in Latin. But anyway, you're an air sign. You need to be able to speak. You need to be able to articulate. You need to be able to discriminate, in other words, to tell the difference between one thing and another, and to judge one thing as being more valuable or more of importance than something else. Air signs also prioritize. So the big question that you're kind of maybe wondering right now is that you might be asking yourself, did I go too far? And the reason for that question is that Neptune entered your opposite sign of Aries in March of 2025. Now, typically, when Neptune is opposite your zodiac sign, it has a very seductive energy. It calls out to you. It calls out to you over a vast expanse, all right? And it's kind of like if you ever read Odysseus when he's traveling back from Troy to Ithaca, and he goes on all these different journeys and adventures. There's one that involves the sirens, which are pretty much nowadays portrayed as mermaids singing out to Odysseus and his crew. And the sirens in Greek mythology were famous for singing out to sailors who would listen to their song and be driven mad with yearning and longing, and they would take their boats towards the singing sirens, and the boats would become dashed on the hard rocks, and they would be thrown into the water, and the sirens would like jump up and feast on them. I mean, they were, horrible, awful images. But anyway, so when Neptune sings to us at a distance and we feel, drawn to it, we can experience right away the enormous gulf or distance between where we are and where this planet that is opposite us is. And so, the Neptune in Aries, that energy that you might have started feeling since March of this year, might have sung out to you with, this is the time to be more Aries in your life. This is the time to be more decisive. This is the time to break the rules. This is the time to make yourself an exception. This is the time to show off your rugged individuality by saying, this doesn't apply to me. I'm going to do whatever it is I want to do. And as a Libra, you might have been seduced by that. You might have been like, oh, what a wonderful way to be. Just in the moment, impassioned, driven by my feelings, not having to run everything past, my inner scanner or my inner editor, not having to weigh everything in the balance constantly, and like, moving my little scale thing like this and that, to come up with the proper balance, the proper weight, the proper price to pay of something, to be free of that, to break the rules, to be my own person, to, be more Aries. What a wonderful thing. And so where before that would have been kind of like, impossible because Neptune is opposite you. It's as far away from you in the zodiacal wheel that it could be. Because of the configurations of Pluto and Aquarius, and then over the summer we just had a touch of it, of Gemini of Uranus and Gemini, the air and the fire energies have mixed together. And air and fire, when you put them together in an astrological chart, particularly by transit, becomes an accelerant. They take an idea and they speed it up. They give it more of a sense of purpose or thrust forward into things. And that's because air and fire together are basically the idea of powering something. Think of, oh, I don't know, those windmills, that are moved by the air and they collect energy, and that energy can move things. And that could be air, or solar panels that collect heat and light, and that creates energy as well. So air and fire together accelerate, they generate energy, they generate power. Whereas water and earth, just to show you, compare and contrast, together is about the growing of things. For instance, you have soil, you plant a seed, you water it, it grows into a plant. So water and earth are pretty much about growing, and air and fire are about powering something. That's kind of like the difference of the two elements. So here, when you had this experience this year of air and fire coming through your chart, coursing through your chart, you might have felt very decisive, very determined, very like and liking it. I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to go through these, long steps or something like that. I'm going to be assertive. I'm going to come from a place of what I want and not be so worried about what other people think. And I'm just going to put on this. And you weren't putting on like something fake. You were putting on a coat that suits you well, that's well fitted. Okay. But air and fire being an accelerant don't always know when they've gone too far. Okay, now, are fire and air signs really all that concerned about going too far? It could be argued, not really. Okay, that fire and air signs aren't really that concerned about going too far. Certainly, the argument would be that the fire signs, the further the better. The more out there, great. And the air signs, for the most part, of like, well, what's going too far exactly? And why not? And why are we following these codes and rules and laws? Let's question them and challenge them and see if they really hold weight. Of all the air signs, Libra's going to be the most concerned about going too far. Okay. And the reason for that is because you were born under the sign of the balance, the scales, the only sign in the zodiac that's not a living animal or a living creature, be it natural or mythological, like the centaur. Um, there's a discernment to Libra. There's always needing to balance things. Now that doesn't mean that you're balancing them because you believe in being balanced in your life or anything along those lines. Scales were used to measure things to determine the value of something. Okay. If you put something on a scale back in the day, and then a counterweight was put on it, it would go up and down until it arrived at what the weight of the object was and what the value of it was. You would look up the value. If it weighs this much, this is how much you get, or this is how much you pay. We experience this all the time when we go and we put vegetables on a scale in a grocery store. I get two bunches of, I don't know, cilantro or something, or a bag of cucumbers. You put it on the scale and it weighs what's in the bag, and it gives me a price that I'm expected to pay. So this is what Libra does. It's a cardinal sign. This idea that it doesn't know its mind. No, it goes back and forth with something. It wants to hear the other side of a story, but it wants to weigh things in the balance to determine the value. Just like in a court of law, you can have a lawyer that is pressing one argument, saying this person's guilty, and you can have another lawyer that's their defense attorney saying, no, this person isn't. And a courtroom is supposed to be a battlefield where you have these arguments that take place in which you're trying to prove the guilt or the innocence, or that someone, if they're being sued, should stop what they're doing or pay out damages. And it's argued, it's worked out, and the judge is there to listen to both sides and to judge. Okay, to put into the scale. Okay, and where in a scale, when we're weighing vegetables or an object, the scale in law is the precedent, it's the law itself. So being a law and order sign is very important when you're a Libra. Following the rule, following the law, that doesn't mean that you just follow a law or anything like that. It's just like that a rule or law is to be obeyed because that's what allows people to get along with one another in a civil society. If we didn't have rules and laws, we would just have people trespassing on other people's property and sleeping with their spouses and making off with their fortunes and their silverware, and there wouldn't be a society. There would be vendettas and vengeance and swordplay in the court. So Libra believes in law and order. But when Neptune entered your opposite sign in the earlier part of this year, it was feeding on a lot of things that have been sort of building up astrologically, certainly over the last 2 years with the eclipses, in which you've been wanting to be more like, what would it be like if I didn't have to follow this rule or this law? What would it be like if I didn't have to be fair all the time? What would it be like if I sallied forth with my desires, my wants, and my needs, my passions, and didn't have to think about the consequences or the partner or the other person so much? And so there might have been kind of thrill or zeal recently to this air and fire energy coming into your chart. But that's not what's going on right now. Right now, you might be asking yourself, did I go too far? Um, and so the first feelings might be watery feelings of guilt or shame or something like that. But I think Neptune in Pisces wants you to go a little further than that. It's more like, what is your emotional responsibility to another person? You know, not your legal responsibility or your protocol responsibility. What is the emotional responsibility to someone else? Imagine being on a seesaw. You're on one end of the seesaw, the other person's on the other end of the seesaw. You go up and down, with this seesaw. But if one of you jumps off the seesaw, the other person goes crashing down onto their derriere. Um, and there's no back and forth, there's no up and down anymore. And so right now you might be looking at, okay, I acted in certain ways in the past few months. I like that feeling. What have been the consequences to it? What have been the reactions? Have some people been like, go Libra, or have some people been like, I had higher expectations of you and I'm sorely disappointed. Have other people been like, I didn't know you had this side to yourself as they, inch themselves away? Or have other people been like, I didn't know you had this side to yourself as they want to get closer? Okay, so these are the things that I want you to really sort of take into account as Neptune moves back into the zodiac sign of Pisces from October 22nd until January 27th of next year, because this is the human part. This is not that the other elements aren't human, but this is the humanizing part. Okay, it's the part that deals with empathy, with sympathy. You can have a law that says, do not hurt another person, and you go and you hurt another person, and the punishment is you get your hand chopped off. Okay, so it's like, okay, the law already said don't hurt someone, but is chopping off someone's hand, like the best reaction to that? Like especially if all you did that hurt the person was pinch them, and now you're going to have your hand chopped. So this is the thing that needs to be balanced. Yes, you get to be more assertive. Yes, you get to put yourself forward more than maybe you've been used to. But no, you don't get to do it irresponsibly. No, you don't get to do it like, it's my turn now, and I'm just going to because you're not built that way. It's not who you are. Okay. You're not a fire sign. You're an air sign, and you're Libra. And so you always care about how it's going to play out with another person, or what another person thinks, or what the other side of the story is. You can never stop doing that. That's what happens when you're born under a sign, or you have that sign as a rising sign. You have to be true to that sign. And you can play variations on it, maybe even do a workaround, but in the end, you still have to be true to the sign. So my message is, you still have to be a Libra, which is balancing and showing concern for other people, and how you interact with them. And perhaps maybe one of the lessons that's been here is that the more that you're a human being in a relationship or in a partnership, rather than someone who's serving an ideal of what a relationship or a partnership should be, the more that you come at that from a more human and humane place, with all of your fallibilities and your vulnerabilities, perhaps the more successful you're going to be in your relationships and your partnerships, and also the more successful you're going to be as yourself. Librans have a tendency to idealize, and one of the things that's always happening is becoming more human in that ideal, and that struggle to be the ideal, and also to be human, and to not treat your own humanity as this ball and chain thing, that the ideal has to become humanized, particularly in relationships. This is the beautiful territory of Librans and what they live in their life. And this is something that you'll be reminded of as you touch base with that deeper, more emotional, more profound, more sensitive part of yourself between October 22nd and January 27th of next year. If you're born under Scorpio, or you have Scorpio rising, this period of time that Neptune returns to the zodiac sign of Pisces, which is from October 22nd until January 27th of next year, this period of time is going to be wonderful for you. It's going to be so lovely. Okay. And the reason for that is because Scorpio is a water sign, which means that you're a very emotional person, you're a very sensitive person. And when you have that kind of emotionality and that kind of sensitivity, you have a lot of empathy and you have a lot of compassion and sympathy, traits that are encouraged, if not emboldened, by any planet that's transiting through the zodiac sign of Pisces. But that creates a little bit of a predicament for you because although you know as a water sign, you do have a tendency to forgive, to soften your heart, to want to be close to another person. One of your ruling planets is still Mars, and the other one's one of your ruling planets is still Mars, and the other one is Pluto. So there's a part of you which is like, can I trust this? Is someone seducing me, luring me into complacency? Pluto is always kind of like, let's look under the surface and see, what's really going on here. Um, so there's a kind of suspicious side or nature to Scorpio, and it's there for a reason. You've been hurt a lot and not through your own self-undoing. You've loved someone very deeply, you've bonded with someone very powerfully. You were there for people when they went through really dreadful or rough passages in their lives, and you bonded through that. And maybe when they got through the rough passage in their life or they got to the other side, they sort of scrambled like a horse out of the river, and shook itself off and trotted away. Once you had crossed the river, the brook, or the stream together, once you have gone through the rough passage together. So you've loved a lot of people and been there for a lot of people very deeply. And then you've also been left by them as soon as the ordeal ended. You might have even become associated with the ordeal that they had gone through. And so that's why they wanted nothing to do with you. So Scorpios have often been hurt. They've often been betrayed. And and it's not always easy to deal or to live with those hurts and those betrayals. The natural tendency is to get angry. And with Mars as one of your ruling planets, that's something that you do, get angry. And, when you feel like, you're falling for someone or loving someone, you're growing soft in your affections, that Mars part is going to come in and say, remember, you've been hurt before. How do you know it's not going to happen again? Toughen up. Don't, don't, don't fall for it. Don't fall for it, Samson, because Delilah's just going to cut your hair off. So there's that part that Scorpios sort of struggle with. So you're not always at ease with, should I give up my suspicion? Something that Scorpios trust is mistrust a lot. And it's a feeling of like, should I give up that suspicion? Should I give up that mistrust? With Neptune back in Pisces, forming a trine to Jupiter in Cancer. Pisces is a water sign, Cancer is a water sign, Scorpio is a water sign. These two planets, Jupiter and Neptune, are trining your sign by sign. You're all water signs, and this creates a grand trine in water by sign. In other words, a complete triangle, a trinity. And so your emotional strength, your emotional resilience, your sense of emotional centeredness and depth and profundity is very powerful right now. And it's very, very strong, but it's changing its hues. It's changing its color on the color spectrum. It's going to be less dark and it's going to become lighter. All right. And so where Scorpios can be like, I'm a very loving person. I'm a deeply loving person. It's other people who aren't worth loving, where Scorpios can sort of be like that. When you feel this self-possessiveness, what we would call sort of confidence in who you are, then it almost doesn't matter what other people do to you. Okay. That when you feel this kind of watery energy, and remember, Jupiter is not only exalted in Cancer, but Jupiter and Neptune are the two rulers of Pisces, and they're trining you during this period of time by sign. This gives you an emotional strength and fortitude that doesn't have to be so hard bitten. It doesn't have to be so calloused. It can be gentle and laughing. It's kind of like if you've ever seen or read A Christmas Carol, it's Scrooge after he's been visited by the three ghosts. He's a child again. He's laughing again. He doesn't, he's not so miserly with his love and his energy, which was expressed in the way that he treated money, because he felt like he lived in a world of scarcity or a world of nonstop disappointment and surrounded by fools who believed silly, ridiculous things. You may very well be feeling kind of like Scrooge on the morning after of the visitation of the three ghosts these days, that there's a chuckle, there's a lightness, there's a humor, there's a lovingness, a givingness, a welcomingness that's flowing through your life right now. And it will be from October 22nd to January 27th of next year, which, of course, being a Scorpio, rising, you're going to be like, that's all I get from October 22nd to January 27th of next year. What happens on January 28th? Okay. I love Scorpios. So, what it is no, when you have this kind of a spa experience, okay, think of it as a spa experience from the stars going on with your horoscope, it's a transformation in a different way. Scorpios are used to ordeals and the transformations that arise from them. That comes with Pluto and having Pluto as your modern ruler. But all transformations don't have to be cathartic. Some transformations can occur because things have been released or opened inside, you know? And that's what's going on with this water energy. It's opening and softening you. It's giving you a courage and a strength in being loving, you know? Um, and it's a fusion of the two zodiac signs that are trining yours, all right? It's going to give you the bondingness of Cancer, of really bonding and loving someone. That's a member of family. This isn't exclusive to members of your family, but kind of treating people like family. Cancer, because it's so associated with hearth and home and family and bonding, especially with children, that when those children turn out to be, maybe not so nice people or dreadful people, the love is still there, because of that bond. That's something that you'll be taking from this, the love of people. And even if they're not nice to you, still a love for them. It's not a big deal. You're not going to go to the only thing I can trust is mistrust place. It'll just be a love of people, and wow, that person must be really tortured if that's the way they're treating other people, and it will be less like that person needs to be punished for treating people so horribly. And it will be more like, well, actually, anyone who has to treat someone like that must be really messed up inside. And maybe I don't want to get too close to that type of person. Or, being there for people when they go through their difficulty and knowing that when they get on the other side of difficulty and they want to go and say, I'm over the ordeal and our friendship is over too because you were great when I was going through this and afterwards I'm whatever. You might be like, I'll be there through your difficulty, but I'm not going to bond with you through it. I'm going to maybe support you, be a friend, tell you the things that I think you should know from a loving place. But what you make of this experience is what you make of it. There's a solidity in that. And that comes from the experience of love and being loving. And the other thing that, of course, that you get from Pisces is the empathy and the compassion and the forgiveness and a realization that, you don't have to go through your life holding a grudge, or being angry, because at a certain time, at a certain point in your life, it drains you. It eats away at you. And is that really the way that you want to live your life? So this kind of like letting go. Pisces is always associated with letting go, releasing, letting go. And that's because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. The order of the zodiac from Aries through to Pisces is really the order of the agricultural year. So Pisces comes at the end, and it's the end of that previous year, because until recently, New Year's was always celebrated pretty much throughout the Western world on the spring equinox and not like January 1st when we started. But anyway, That's pretty much when it's been, because the spring equinox marked the beginning of the agricultural year. So Pisces is a lot about letting that old year go. That was then, and this is now as it enters into the zodiac sign of Aries. So this sort of loving, which comes from your experience, but also this idea of sort of unclenching the fist, you know, that you can forgive someone and not like them. Okay. You can forgive someone and not have them in your life. It doesn't mean that they have to be in your life, but what it does mean is maybe stop cursing them or, looking for repeat versions of them or reincarnations of them in new relationships and associations, and I think most of all, having a strength of your heart that when you get betrayed again, and you probably will be, or disappointed or let down or heartbroken again, it doesn't have to kill you. It's like, okay, that happened again. And instead of getting angry at yourself, be like, and you know what? It's that person's loss that I'm not in their life, not the other way around. I have my life and I have me. And it's that person's loss that I'm not in their life. And maybe it's my gain that I'm not in that person's life. And maybe they were bad news. So there's a kind of humor that comes with love. Everyone thinks that, to forgive, be loving is kumbaya, and it's not. Love brings humor because love is an understanding, an integral, organic understanding of humanity. It doesn't mean that you have to like hold people accountable for all sorts of dreadful things. I mean, people should be accountable and they should pay for crimes or penalties or anything along those lines, but you don't have to get caught up in it and stuck in it. You can go on and live your life and you can go on and love the people that you love. And this is what I see coming through you. You're kind of like getting this real push of what it's like to be a Cancer, like where if it's not your own family that you love, it's the family that you choose, it's the people in your life that you love and that you surround yourself with. And this sense of kinship and fellowship, which isn't necessarily biological, but it is loving. This is something that you're going to be experiencing on a very deep level and then carrying forward with you. Because once you experience this, Scorpio, it never goes away. You carry this forward with you into your life. And so that there is a new type of strength and there is a fuller type of love that's operating in your psyche when Neptune departs Pisces on January 27th, 2026. If you're born under Sagittarius or you have Sagittarius rising, on October 22nd, when Neptune returns to the zodiac sign of Pisces, it's going to feel like you've been thrown into the deep end again. And I'm not sure you're going to like it too much. You just recently got yourself out of the deep end when Neptune left Pisces earlier this year and entered the zodiac sign of Aries in March of 2025. Neptune in Aries began generating Aries or fire energy. And that was excitable and really good for you, okay, because you're born under Sagittarius and Sagittarius is a fire sign. Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are fire signs. You want to feel lit. You want to feel ignited. You want to feel like you're going somewhere in your life. As a Sagittarius, you are inspired by your wonder. You are inspired by your faith. You're constantly searching for your higher purpose in life. And you want to find God in the world that you live in. This might make some of you Sagittarians chuckle, but Sagittarius is very much associated with divine love because of its rulership to Jupiter. That doesn't mean that you have to be religious or believe in God. You could believe in nature as a deity. You could be concerned about the health of the planet. You could be in pursuit of truth, and your pursuit of truth is like Prometheus giving fire to mankind. The pursuit of truth is something that illuminates life. Sagittarius is a deeply humanitarian zodiac sign. It cares about humanity, and that comes from its ruling planet, Jupiter, Zeus in Greek mythology, who's one of the few gods after they set up house and home in heaven, who actually comes back down to Earth and interacts with Earth and enjoys living on the world that he created. All right. So Zeus is a very interactive deity. It's not one of those deities that create the world and then they go to sleep or become absentee or don't show up anymore. Zeus is very active. In fact, he's always looking for excuses to sneak away from Olympus and frolic among the mortal folk. So this adventurousness, this fun-loving, this bonhomie, this jovial, okay, the word jovial, happy, comes from Jove, which was Jupiter's Roman name. Okay, this is something that you began to feel again when Neptune entered Aries. It's like this lightness, like this heaviness went away, and now you're light and you're drawn to things that are fresh and new and young and beautiful and are in their springtime, just starting out again. And it's mirroring your own springtime, your own really renaissance, which I think might be a more accurate way of putting it, where you feel like yourself again. And you probably maybe haven't felt this for at least 13 years. I mean, it might very well be that long, but you feel like not only, I mean, imagine like, well, not imagine, it's been your life. I mean, you've been like in the tunnel with the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, everything changes when you leave the tunnel and you're just in the light. And so here you are in the light and you're enjoying it, you're loving it. It's a wonderful place to be. I mean, you might have to adjust your eyes to the light because you've been in the darkness so long, or you've been stuck in a rut for so long that you have to, sort of get used to the lay of the land. But of course, no sooner were you getting used to the light and the lay of the land than Neptune turned retrograde and on October 22nd moves back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces, which means back in the pool, back in the water, back in the depths. All right. Or back with that feeling of treading water and not being able to feel the ground under your feet. Water and fire together, they get each other, but they don't necessarily get along very well. It's kind of like the difference between I love and like. It's like when a parent says, I love you, I always will love you to their child, but then they follow it with, but I don't like you right now. Right now, you're a really annoying 15-year-old. I mean, I love you, but I don't like you right now. Okay, so that's kind of the relationship between fire and water, particularly Pisces, because Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, just like Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Sagittarius wants to experience wonder and the openness of the world. And Pisces does too. Pisces has as much wanderlust and love of traveling and experience of different cultures and people as a Sagittarius does. But where Sagittarius feels like we live in a moral universe, that the universe is ultimately good, but it's dealing with a lot of bad. And it's the struggle between good and bad that creates our civilization, or the story of our civilization, as we try to reach the highest in ourselves, which is a very fiery principle. Okay, because the fire that the ancients talked about in astrology wasn't a campfire, it was the stars themselves. That's why the fire signs were so elevated, because the stars were elevated above our heads. These were crackling fires in the heavens. With Pisces, it's about not the heights, which Sagittarians are always drawn to, the heights, the sensation, the uplift, you know. Pisces, it's about the depth. It's about going deeper, you know. And where Sagittarius believes that we live in a moral universe and we're in conversation with it, we're understanding it as we connect to our higher purpose. Pisces is like, yeah, that's a good idea, but we also live in a mysterious universe where the rules and laws of the universe aren't always coherent. They don't always make sense. And there is such a thing as an inexplicable God or a deity that doesn't have to explain itself, and this is called mysticism, which is that religious experience which is not described or lives within the circumference of a church or a temple or a doctrine or a scripture. Okay. It's a mystical experience of whatever is sacred and also its differentness than us. We may be made in the image of something that's sacred, or we may be part of the sacred unfoldment of a plan, but that doesn't mean that we know the sacred's mind. And that's mysticism, connecting to that incredible depth that doesn't lend itself to explanation or description. This is something that Pisces really wraps themselves in. This is why they'll go to ashrams or meditation centers or whatever and be silent for like 2 weeks. It's just to sort of be in that silence, in that nothingness. This is a very powerful mystical experience. Something that isn't exactly inviting for people born under Sagittarius or Sagittarius rising. Okay, they want to know the reason why, the purpose behind, what this is all about. What's the lesson in life that I am learning? And so for you to return back to Pisces after having struggled with that energy for about 12 years, 13 years, with you having to return back to that, you're not interested and you don't want to. It's a downer. It's like regressive. It feels like, you're going backwards rather than forwards. You're going down rather than up, which is where Sagittarius wants to be. But there is a reason you're returning or revisiting, or Neptune is revisiting Pisces. There is something for you to find in that return. There is something valuable for you in that retrograde. And that is your emotional responsibility to other people. You might recall that I just described Sagittarius as being a very humane sign. It's a very humanistic sign. It's very drawn to the potential in humanity and humanity becoming the best that it can be. And fire signs, particularly Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, but very much in Sagittarius, see themselves as being made in the image of something divine. Okay. And when you're made in the image of something divine, it's not like you're divine and better than everyone else. It means you have to share space with everyone else who's been made in the image of the divine, and maybe all the creatures of the land and the sea that have been made in the image of the divine, or maybe it's the molecules made in the image of the divine. We're all in the image of the divine. And that's the humanity that the Jupiter ruled signs like Sagittarius and Pisces understand. You know, when you think of yourself in a regular life in your life, okay, that neighbor across the street, with all the, tacky like Christmas lighting or whatever, and blares out Christmas music was made in the image of the divine, or like, oh my God, that horrible person who's so, condescending and looks down their nose at everyone and like affects some sort of bizarre, like mid-Atlantic accent or whatever was made in the image of the divine. Yes, they are made in the image of the divine. And this is really kind of what Neptune back in Pisces is showing you. It's not just the pretty people that are made in the image of the divine, or the fun people who are made in the image of the divine, or the really interesting people or people you can learn from who are made in the image of the divine. It's everybody. Everybody is made in the image of the divine. That's where Pisces compassion and sympathy comes from. Okay. And it's something that Sagittarians can understand, but they want it to be more uplifting. They want it to be more of an upper, because that's the nature of fire. I don't want it to be, if you're a fire sign, I don't want my fire element doused or extinguished by water, but be the light in the darkness, right? And that's the beauty of Sagittarius. I mean, of all the fire signs, you know, they're the light in the darkness. Aries is the return of the sun at the beginning of spring, so that's really kind of like the lighting of the match. Leo is the height of the sun in the height of the season of abundance here in the northern hemisphere, which is where astrology is created. So that's the light in the match put in a wonderful lantern. It fills the heavens. It's the sun filling the sky in the daytime. Summer is when days are longest, nights are shortest. Sagittarius, we are definitely experiencing longer nights and shorter days. And Sagittarius is not the lit match. It's not the sun in its glory in the heaven. Sagittarius is the votive candle carried in the lantern as we head into the winter, into the darkness of winter. So Sagittarius carries the light into the dark. It's the beauty of Sagittarius. That's why faith, belief is so important to a Sagittarius. This is what you carry inside of yourself. when the world goes dark and cold and wintry, only to be reignited or lit onto a larger fire when the sun returns to Aries next spring. So Sagittarius will carry the light in the darkness. That's part of the makeup of Sagittarius. You have an emotional responsibility to other people. That's not an obligation. That's not, you have to do what they say. That doesn't mean that you're beholden. But in every one of your actions, it has an impact on someone else. All right. And for a zodiac sign that's so concerned about humanity and being a good person and being just, which is also important to Sagittarius, you were not born under a retaliatory sign, a hostile sign. It can be argued you were born under an evangelical one, okay, spreading the word of the light, okay, that's definitely part of Sagittarius. But you were born under a zodiac sign that's very human, that's very humorous, that understands that faults are what make us human and that actually has a good humor about those things. And with it is an emotional responsibility to other people. And this is what Neptune's retrograde back down into Pisces is reminding you of. Because once Neptune leaves Pisces, and that's going to be on January 27th of 2026, it doesn't revisit Pisces for another 165 years. So you have to take this humanity, this compassion, this empathy, things that are so connected to Neptune and Pisces. You have to take these things and you have to place them in yourself and you have to carry them. All right. Sagittarius is a zodiac sign that's always associated to the conscience. Okay. Like Pinocchio. Jiminy Cricket sings, give a little whistle and always let your conscience be your guide. And Jiminy Cricket is the conscience of Pinocchio in that story, always getting him to question his actions or to look at the impact or the effect, you know. And this is something that's born into every Sagittarian. Sometimes you don't want to think about that. You just want to be you and be free, which is wonderful. That's what fire signs should do. But you also have an emotional responsibility. That doesn't mean you have to be back under someone's thumb or anything like that. But you have to, or you don't have to do anything. It would be a good idea to have a care, to have a care for someone else, even if they are as different from you can be, because they, like you, were created in the image of the divinity. And if you're going to be true to your higher purpose, if you're going to be true to the divinity within yourself, then you're going to want to have a care with the other people that you share your life and this planet with. If you're born into Capricorn or you have Capricorn rising, you've gone through a number of years where you had Neptune traveling through the zodiac sign of Pisces, and for a lot of that time, that Neptune in Pisces was forming a sextile to Pluto in your own sign, which was Capricorn. And so that was a growth period for you. Pluto and Neptune didn't really start sextiling by sign until about maybe 2012. Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, 2009, but in 2012 they started sextiling one another. And so that might have marked a period of time of growth for you from 2012 until recently. Earth and water go together because you plant a seed in earth and you pour water on it and it grows. So earth and water come together because they're complementary, but they're also about growth. In March of 2025, Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries, which is a fire sign, a cardinal sign like you, and also squares your zodiac sign. So where you might have been feeling kind of like I'm doing my own thing and I'm growing or I'm coming out of my Pluto transformation, because when you have Pluto in your sign, it brings ordeals along with the transformations that arise from them. So you kind of felt like this is a new you, reborn. You're looking at life very differently. And this would have been a very encouraging and very confident time for you. maybe last year and into the first part of this year as you're sort of getting your bearings after your rebirth, which is actually what you've been through in definitely in 2024. Um, but then Neptune moved into Aries. It's a fire sign. Aries squares Capricorn. And so it started bringing about that feeling of pushing yourself again. Okay. Um, Aries and Capricorn square one another. They're both cardinal signs, which means that they both have an idea of how you should approach something, and that idea is different. Okay, Aries' idea of approaching something is urgent. Now you lock horns and you fight for what you want. Spring equinox, it's ruled by Mars. Capricorn's idea of approaching something is to scale the wall, is to scale the obstacle that's between you and what you want. So where Aries, attacks something directly, Capricorn is always looking up to something higher, and it's trying to figure out how do I get from my low spot in the hierarchy or the totem pole or the low spot on the mountain to a higher place in life. Okay, so Capricorn is always scaling the heights. Its approach is more cautious, it's more careful because it's more determined. Once the goat is up on some of those mountain sides that it's scaling, we have like bungee ropes and we work with the rocks and things like that. And rock climbing is something, that became trendy recently, but the goats have been doing it in their, as a species since the beginning of goat time. Okay, so Capricorn is cautious, but it's also steady, and there is a risk side to Capricorn as it tests out how it's going to climb. And then it wants to get that climbing down to a fine science. So there's a methodical quality to Capricorn as well. And because what makes Aries urgent, other than its ruling planet being Mars, it's the time of year. It's spring equinox when things are just springing to life. And we think, oh, flowers are springing to life and blossoms on the trees. Well, weeds are springing to life as well, and things that feed on flowers and leaves are springing to life. So the spring is actually kind of a battleground between the things that are living, they want to be up and growing, and the other things that want to eat the things that are being born for the new year, the other things that want to eat the things that are up and growing, or that are like, oh, we went through our period of time where there was nothing more much to eat, and now we can eat again. So let's eat those things that are growing. So there's an embattled feeling to Aries and that time of year, spring. To Capricorn, it's scarcity and it's cold, and the steps can be slippery, and so it's very deliberate in the way that it's trying to climb up, and it's studied, and it wants to bring about its experience, and then it wants to apply it to its ascent. Okay. So where Aries can be like, here now, lock horns, Capricorn is, I'm going to climb up over you if you're an obstacle and get to, the higher heights where I need to be and feed and thrive and leap among the rocks and things along those lines. So there's a squaring energy, but what it can bring out, what both signs do have in common is ambition and drive. Okay. Aries is driven to burst onto the scene, and to take that start and take the lead with that start. Your book has been published or whatever, and you got to sell it right now, because it's never hotter than when it first makes its premiere. Okay. And so Aries is like, something's made its debut or premiere, and you have to get as far as you can possibly get as quickly as you can get there. And Capricorn is usually an experience of, I've often been thwarted or disappointed early on. So, and I've gone through depression and feelings of failure about it. But what I've learned from all of that is how to make my own particular way, you know. But both of them are very driven, and both of them can be very ambitious. And with Neptune moving into Aries and squaring you, you may be feeling the urgency. You may be feeling the competition again, the drive. But what makes it different this time is that you're very aware of other people being in the same race as you. All right. And or maybe they're climbing the same mountain you're climbing, and you have to get to the top of it. So if Capricorns are going to compete, they're competing in terms of playing the long game, all right? Which is something you've done, something you're familiar with, something you understand. I mean, Capricorns don't spend all their time on the top of peaks. They spend actually more of the time in the valley because they reach the peak of one mountain, they look up, they see a mountain peak that's higher than theirs, which means they have to climb down from the peak that they're on and travel the valley and then climb up that new mountain. So this is something Capricorns do. What you may not be so accustomed to is the urgency thing, the thing that everything really matters. It has to be done now. It's high stakes. And so this may be undermining the things that you've learned over the past few years, which is that you had a method, you take your time, you have a way, you have a plan, you have a way of doing something. And now all of a sudden, now that you're back, it's kind of like being on a nice country road and you turn around the bend and you enter a freeway. Okay, so now it's a feeling of like you're back on the freeway with this Neptune in Aries. And so you might have felt like you had to abandon who you were before, or your your country road pilgrimage has come to an end, and now you have to like be all sharp elbows and step on people's feet as you're back in the rat race or back in the game. So when Neptune retrogrades back down into Pisces on October 22nd, it's going to be a reminder. It's going to remind you of the things that you have learned, of the wisdom that you have acquired. And it's going to remind you of the value of that, the goodness of that. Um, and it's going to say to you, don't forget everything that you learned. Don't travel back into time to who you were in 2007, don't forget all of that. That you can be true to yourself and the things that you want to experience and acquire in your life in an organic way. It doesn't have to be gladiators in the Colosseum, going at one another. Okay. You don't have to return to that. All right. Um, Bring the fullness of your experience forward. Lead with your imagination. Lead with compassion that you have. If people, if colleagues are picking fights or whatever, don't jump into the argument with them. Just take your time and figure out how you want to respond that's going to be in service to the project and not about, locking horns. So some of the Aries message is going to be useful for you when Neptune moves back into Aries, which is going to be late January in 2026. But this Pisces reminiscence, this Pisces remembrance, this looking at things from the depth and from a place of compassion and sympathy so that you can practice it in your life. This wasn't what you discovered on a journey and you got these rewards, but now you're back in the real world again. No, it's what you discovered on your journey, and they're meant to be applied to the real world again. And the person applying it is you. Okay. They're not being applied at you or things that you have to do in order to get from a to one place to another. You're the person applying this. So this is your creed. This is your gospel. This is your personal things that you've learned to live your life by and bring that forward. You might have felt in the past few months that you had to be tough, you had to be, competitive, you had to be on edge, you had to hit your numbers or whatever. You might have gone back to old Capricorn, and no, you're new Capricorn. And actually, what I should say is you're mature Capricorn. Okay, so don't throw off all of those things that you learned because the world isn't acting in the way that you thought it should be. Take those things and apply it to the world as it is, and you are going to find the world responding in kind back. In other words, it's not going to be so sharp elbows and bread and circuses and competitive. That following your own path will take you up that sheer side of the mountain, that you will get to the top. But the top won't be such a lonely place. A top will be a place of fulfillment and a place where you take in the majesty all around you. And this is the great gift that Neptune retrograding back into Pisces can give you now, moving forward into the next chapter of your life. If you're born under Aquarius or you have Aquarius rising, Neptune retrograding back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces is going to be a little bit of a bump in the road for you. When Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries in March of 2025, you really felt that energy of moving forward. And that's because fire connected to air is very locomotive, it's very kinetic, it's very movement oriented. So you would have felt that movement forward, you would have felt like you were really getting in places, and you would have felt pretty much back on track in your life. Um, and it's not really just back on track. I think the truer way or the better way of describing what it is I'm trying to describe is that you would have felt like developments were moving you forward. Developments that were unfolding were moving you forward in your life, and that this was a good place to be. That since March of 2025, you were meeting with like-minded people, people who understood what you were about or what you wanted to do. People who weren't like, I don't get it, or you can't do that here, but who are like, that's a really great idea. Let's look for ways to make that happen. People who sort of wanted to take your vision of things and your understanding of things and expand on them, and this would have been a really great feeling. I mean, at first you might have been a little shy because Aquarians tend to be a little shy with the like I came up with this idea. Okay, it's like Aquarians, if too much attention is put on them, they have a tendency to deflect it or talk about someone else. So for people to say like, that's a great idea, let's build on it, you've been like, mm. But as long as it comes with, that's a great idea, let us all build on it. As an Aquarius, you're in. Okay, so it's like, okay, I had this idea, but now it's going to become better because it's going to be a lot of different people's ideas, and we're all going to like input and build on something. This is something that Neptune in Aries is really doing for you right now, along with Saturn being in the zodiac sign of Aries. And that's because fire sextiles air. Aries forms a sextile to Aquarius on the zodiacal circle. It's a very empowering combination of elements. So, with Neptune's retreat back into Pisces, which is watery, which is heavier by nature, you might have experienced some kind of derailment, okay, either physically or emotionally or psychically. With Neptune's retrograde back down into Pisces, you might start feeling a sort of depression again, a kind of heaviness or melancholy again. You might find yourself meandering. Maybe there's a kind of wandering feeling or wondering while you're wandering feeling. And you might be like, why am I back in this again? I mean, I was cooking with gas earlier in the year. Like, why am I, in this kind of like psychologically incapacitated place or depressed place or feeling the heaviness of life place again? Aquarius has some understanding of Pisces, but one of the things that Aquarians can be a little bit short or impatient with Pisces is the indulgence in the depression. Pisces has an understanding of depression and melancholy, but that goes along with romanticism and euphoria and love and all these things. This is all part of the palette, all the range of colors that Pisces paints with. But Aquarians always get a bit like, Pisces really kind of gets into being depressed or down on themselves or something like that. And that's because Aquarius, being an air sign, has this mind over matter approach to life. And that approach also goes with mind over emotional life as well. You like if the emotions tend to get too heavy or too melancholic, which they tend to do with Aquarius. One of its ruling signs is Saturn, which is the planet of melancholy. When things get a little bit too melancholic or a little bit too heavy or too depressed, that's when Aquarians kind of fly up into their abstraction self, like God is math, or things can be worked out if you have a formula or a system to work them out with. I mean, Aquarians really trust their mind and their thinking mind over at times their emotional life, because with their emotional life they tend to feel more of the despondency or more of the heaviness. And their reaction to it is to sort of objectify the emotional life or maybe even disconnect from it altogether. So now with Neptune moving back into Pisces And you've already gone through basically about 13 years of Neptune and Pisces, so you're over it. You liked Neptune and Aries and the way it was sextiling your fire, like blowing up your balloon and lifting it like a hot air balloon and letting you travel over the countryside. You liked that part. But now with Neptune back in Pisces and you're starting to feel that melancholy again and that depression again, you're just like, ugh, I can't believe this is, how long does it last again, Christopher? From October 22nd to January 27th? Okay. I can be mind over matter from then, from October 22nd to until January 27th. That's what I'll do until we get back into the fire stuff and I feel more on track again. I'd love to say, yeah, that's great, but I can't. And the reason that I can't is water is one of the four elements, and although you're an air sign, and even though you're born under the zodiac sign of relationship and you talk about people and their feelings and their thoughts and the way that they act and behave, and you very involved in the way that people interact with one another, when it gets into the emotional stuff, you have a tendency to distant from that, And so what may be happening is that you might be experiencing depression in a partner or depression in someone who's close to you. Um, People that you work with might be, you know, taking personal days or dealing with melancholic or heavier feelings. And so when it comes to yourself, when those feelings have come up where you might have had a tendency to disconnect or disassociate from them, when it's coming to you through the people in your life, this is actually an opportunity to understand in them you. Or maybe a better way of putting it is to see mirrored in them what's going on with you. As an Aquarius, you're very people oriented. If someone's, talking to you about issues that they're having, melancholy, depression, feeling lost, or whatever, you're there and you're going to listen to them. I mean, you're also going to bring them back to what they should be focusing on, which is their work or their job or duties or responsibilities or obligations or the great cause that you're fighting for. But you are going to meet them there. What you have an opportunity here with Neptune returning to Pisces is seeing other people experiencing similar things to you, and that it doesn't have to rob you of your life. It doesn't have to um, burden you or overwhelm or domineer you, that you can connect to another person. Now, depression is a very real thing, and we all suffer from it to different degrees and different grades of it. And depression can be immobilizing. That's absolutely true. The antidote to depression isn't to, like, think good thoughts or take yourself out for a walk or exercise at the gym. It can be at times immobilizing physically or emotionally or mentally. But when you see that taking place in the lives of the people around you and you connect on that, you have an opportunity to share and to understand, and that sort of changes the isolation. It doesn't become as isolating or as shaming. And what you may find, as you might be meeting people who are struggling with melancholy or hurt or pain or grief, that as an Aquarius, you don't have to have the answer to that, and that you can be someone that they talk to, that you can be compassionate, that you can be sympathetic. And this may even teach you to be more compassionate and sympathetic with yourself, to let in the heavier feelings into your psyche. They're not going to take over, your life or your psyche, or they don't have to. You have an opportunity here to sort of understand them and to share them in a way that isn't based on mind over psyche. It can be mind with psyche or mind with emotions. The mind doesn't have to be struggling to dominate the emotions. It can be there with, and you can draw from both sources, like you can draw from both sides of the brain. And this is a wonderful thing to know and to experience, this revisit of Neptune to Pisces from October 22nd to January 27th, because after January 27th, there's going to be less water energy in the transiting planets and much more fire and air. And if you can carry that watery experience with you, you know, then you add to your idea of mind, you add to your thinking, you add to your understanding to people so that it's not just, you're not just living a life that's idea based or systems based or analyzed based or rules and laws based, but you're living a life that also includes the emotional part of you and the emotional part of you that might not be something that you're proud of or you find appealing, but nevertheless is something that you can draw upon because it gives you wisdom, it gives you profundity, and perhaps most importantly of all, it gives you your connection to other people. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, Neptune, which is your modern ruler, left your zodiac sign earlier this year after a 13-year stay in your zodiac sign. So you've had 13 years of really experiencing life according to Pisces. Okay. So in the past 13 years, have you suffered disappointments and difficulties and setbacks? Yes, because that's part of being a Pisces. But what you've also experienced is euphoria, creativity, and breakthroughs with yourself as well. You've really grown as a person. And this has also been a wonderful time as much as it has been a challenging time for you. Well, Neptune left Pisces and entered the zodiac sign of Aries in March of 2025. And this would have been a big world shift for you because you were living in a watery universe, and now you're on dry land. It's kind of like in prehistory, there's a point where the fish, sort of get legs and they pull themselves out of the water and onto the land. I mean, it's always shown to happen in this miracle moment of evolution when you look at those old picture books, but it's the idea here of evolution, of coming out of the sea and learning to walk on land and breathe air, and that's where you are right now in your life. You're coming out of life underwater into life on the surface, and part of you is really eager to show what you're like this, to see what the world is like this. But you still carry the best and the not so great parts of Pisces with you. The best part of Pisces is that creativity, that euphoria, that ecstasy in life and living. Pisces has such a poetic relationship to life, and when you're on that Pisces high, I mean, you're ecstatic, you're positively rhapsodic when it comes to life and nature and being with people and celebrating the talents of others and celebrating the talents of your own. The not so great part of Pisces is the sort of what I call the doom scrolling part of Pisces. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and that's because it's the last sign of the year. It's the last zodiac sign of the year, the last month of the year. We think of a year as beginning on January 1st nowadays. That's a new year, but until recently, the New Year's was always pretty much connected to the spring equinox, at least here in the northern hemisphere. And so Pisces marked the end of the old world or the end of the old year, and then it was followed by Aries, which was out of the gate and starting the new year. So there was always kind of a sort of apocalyptic feeling to Pisces, that the world is coming to an end, And so Pisces, if you're Pisces sun or rising, you kind of have a sensitivity to end of the world tendencies, what I call apocalyptic tendencies, where this world of pain and suffering comes to an end, and then we're uplifted to a world of heavenly delight and beauty and pure ecstasy, maybe. Or things are just on a downward slide into chaos and oblivion or something along those lines. And Pisces can get into those downward spirals. Okay. They can get into those, what I call sort of psychic doom scrolling, where they seize upon everything that's wrong or awful, and they stay right there. And so you've gone through that too, but maybe in the past few months, you've started to see more of a lightness or a brevity entering into your life, more of a sense of like, okay, the world is going to come to an end, like, I'm sure at some point, but why not live in the world as it is right now. It's actually a really beautiful place. It's really a delightful place. And so this has been a shift in the Pisces psyche recently. But you're not without your acquired wisdom. You're not without your life experience. And so when Neptune moves back into Pisces again from October 22nd to January 27th, you may see some of those things that you predicted or prophesied come true. Now, I'm not saying this is on the level of Nostradamus. Okay, you're not, like in quatrain 15, cinquanto, the earth will come to an endo under a firestormo, or no, it's not going to be that. Um, but what it is that things that you felt to be true about life, the way that you saw things going, maybe the warnings you gave to loved ones and friends about their lives or relationships or something like this. When Neptune retrogrades back down into Pisces on October 22nd, you're going to be hearing from them. And they're going to be telling you things like, you know what you said about me and Randy? That was true. You were right. Or, you know what you said about me sort of like moving on to something or whatever? That was true. That was right. You know what you said about things not working out? That was true. That was right. You're going to be hearing this a lot during the time that Neptune retrogrades back down into Pisces, where it is from October 22nd to January 27th. People coming and saying, you were right about that, or your judgment call was spot on. And it's going to be some of the more maybe pessimistic, or maybe some of the more like, things that people didn't want to hear at the time. And what it's going to make you feel like is kind of Cassandra being listened to for the first time. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Cassandra, but she was a prophetess of Troy, and the god Apollo gave her the gift of prophecy, and he fell in love with her, and she wanted nothing to do with him, and she rejected his amorous advances. And Apollo said, I'm going to curse you. And she's like, oh no. And he's like, you will have the gift of prophecy. I can't take back something that I gave you. But what I can add to it is that no one will believe you. Okay. And she's like, no one believed me. And so she still had the gift of prophecy, but where people came to her before for advice and they followed what she said, now that she had been cursed by Apollo, they listened to her and they're like, oh, that's ridiculous. That can't possibly be true. And so they never came to her in her temple. They didn't listen to her anymore. They didn't believe what she had to say. And so she was driven to a kind of hysteria because she's still seeing the future, but no one's believing it. And of course, it comes to a climax. She's a Trojan princess. It comes to a climax with the Trojan horse. She when the Greeks leave the Trojan horse there in front of the city, and they're like, "Oh, it's a great gift from the Greeks. Let's open the doors." She like cries out and says, "Don't! It's treachery. There's armies in there. I see bloodshed. Troy will fall." And they're like, "Oh, Cassandra, you going on about those things again?" And so she's like, and of course that's exactly what happens. And everyone's like, we should have listened to Cassandra. Cassandra, what do you see happening? And she's like, I see this. And they're like, we don't believe you. So I mean, the curse still followed her, no matter how many times she was right. And that's the way that Pisces can sometimes feel in their life, that they can see things and they know it's right, and everyone doesn't believe them, and then it does come true, and then they see something again and they don't believe them still. It's kind of like a never ending, it's kind of called the Cassandra complex. Anyway, this is going to be a period of time where everyone believes you, okay, where everyone says you were right. And they're going to want to listen to your advice and what you have to say, and they're actually going to follow it. Okay. So, the wonderful thing about Neptune coming back to Pisces is that you're going to find out that you were right all along, which is a good feeling because it's like, to be saying these things to people who wouldn't listen to you. I mean, like, how lonely and demeaning and dispiriting can that be? But you're going to find that people are really listening to you and really believing you. Now, you might have noticed I said that Neptune's back in Pisces from October 22nd to January 27th. And you might naturally feel like, okay, so after January 27th, people go back to not believing me again? And no, it's not that. But between now and January 27th, as you enjoy the validation of people, telling you that you were right, you might also take into account the way that you presented that information, before. Did you present that information in a sort of doomsday way? Did you present that information in a sort of pessimistic way? Did you present that information with not having been asked? If someone's like, I love Lorraine, and your response was, it will never work, and you weren't even asked. Okay. So the thing is, it's one thing to be able to see things, to be psychic, which Pisces rising, you just have that whether you want it or not, you have that. But you also have to take responsibility for the words that are coming out of your mouth. Okay. First of all, did someone even ask? You don't get to just weigh in, like, does someone ask or not? And the other thing is, are you being true to are you being in service to the truth that you are espousing? Or are you finding a way to communicate that truth in a way that someone can use? That isn't prohibitive, that isn't doomed, that isn't full of fear and anxiety. Are you finding a way, you may have this feeling, this idea, this vision, okay, but then are you communicating it in a way that's going to help someone? Okay. So this period of time not only gives you a lot of reflection, but it gives you an opportunity to revisit the way that you communicate to other people. And it doesn't just have to be like psychic flashes or prophecy or what you see ahead of you. It's the way of communicating to other people in general, and that perhaps if you can find a more positive way, if you can honor whether someone asked you or not, can you work with the information and truth that in a way that's going to make it constructive, that's going to enable or help that person out, rather than bring them down or say, that what they're looking at is a falsehood. These are great creative challenges. They say that truth should just be bald and raw, and I guess it can be, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do anyone any good. When you have an ability to sort of see a truth, and that also brings with it a responsibility for speaking that truth, also look for ways to make that truth digestible, to make it coherent, understandable, to make it constructive. If you can do that, and I know that you can, and that's what you're going to be working on between October 22nd and January 27th, you're going to find that not only are people going to be believing you, um, that they're also going to be understanding you and seeing in what you're saying something that they can use to better their life, and when you can connect to that, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's one thing to be able to see something, but then to translate it for the use of other people and also to translate it for the use of yourself. This is something that is a tremendous benefit. And it's a gift. It's a gift that you have that you can share with others and that you can also share with yourself.